Hello! In the age of AI art, things that we create offline feel extra precious and important. And with the takeover of fast fashion, I've been seeing even more renewed interest in textile and fiber arts. I went to the library to research for this video, and in the front by the checkout where they have like the very popular books on that little stand, 2 out of 10 were quilting books, which I then promptly checked out. Today we're talking about the history and methods of quilt making, the cultural impact specifically of the American quilt, and why this art form slash decor item slash utilitarian blanket is timeless. I wore my quilted vest for this occasion. See the back? Pretty cool, huh? When I think quilts, I think American. Though obviously quilts have been around long before America was. According to zubium.org, in the history of quilting, evidence of quilting can be traced back to ancient Egypt. An ivory carving in the British Museum depicts the first Egyptian dynasty king wearing a quilted mantle. Other examples of quilted garments date back to the 12th century. By sewing fabric pieces together and encasing padding inside. Seamstresses and tailors created garments for crusaders to keep them warm and comfortable under their protective armor. You might see in the background I've got all my books open that I'm going to be referencing.
It's a quilt! And it has our pictures on it!
Here, put it here.
So what is quilting anyway? There's a misconception that quilting is the sewing of patches of cloth together. And while that is definitely a part of the tradition of quilting, it's not what quilting actually is. Cloth that has been arranged together into some sort of pattern is called a pieced patchwork. That's often used as a quilt topper. Quilting is the action of stitching the layers of the quilt together with the top, the inside, which is wadding or batting, and then the bottom. It's like a sandwich. So multiple pieces of cloth that are held together with stitching is what a quilt is actually. So the 3 types of quilts are whole cloth, pieced, and appliqued. Whole cloth is just like it sounds. It's one piece of cloth that doesn't have any cut pieces going on inside at all. It's just solid. It can have a print. Oftentimes they are just a solid color. Because there's no pieced pattern, it lets the stitching really be the star of the show. With a pieced quilt, of course, that is when we have the different scraps or pieces, usually geometric, put together, sewn together to create an interesting pattern or design. Each repeated portion is called a block, and these blocks usually have distinct names. I thrifted this book a while back, and it has a ton of block patterns, and it tells you the names of them. Applique is taking smaller pieces of fabric and layering them on top of larger pieces to create patterns and pictures. These don't have to fit perfectly together like pieced ones, so they can be a little bit more organic in shape, but this is usually how small intricate details are achieved on a quilt.
Ben and I are weaving our lives together, so I have woven this quilt. It represents every member of our new united family. Of all my metaphorical art projects, this is by far the coziest.
I thrifted this book a while back as well. You can see all my post-its for notes for this video. I'm going to refer to this a lot. Each section of the book is written by a different quilting expert. In this chapter, An American Tradition, Laura Fisher says, the quilting tradition in this country began in the early 18th century as pioneer women sought ways to keep their families warm. Quilts have evolved with this nation's history into a highly personal folk art form, entailing crafts as well as creativity. Indeed, they are beginning to be recognized as one of the foremost examples of American folk art. Quilts were made almost exclusively by women who took pleasure and comfort in quilt making as one of the few creative outlets allowed them. Even in the hands of a member of a somber religious sect or impoverished American family, quilts reflected a spirit and energy that makes them outstanding examples of a national and international folk art. While quilting may be found in many areas of the world, it is the Americans who have experimented with, embellished, and developed it. So quilts in my mind's eye, and maybe in yours too, the ones that are pieced together in these geometric patterns are a style that is uniquely American. Quilts were created by all the economical classes, from the poor to the wealthy. For the wealthy, of course, it was more of a privilege, a pastime, sort of crafting to create something beautiful and decorative. While on the flip side, The poor were creating utilitarian blankets with thick layers to keep themselves warm. We don't get to see a lot of quilts that were made by lower class, lower income, poorer folks because they were being used up. Even if they were the most gorgeous quilt you've ever seen, they were being used as blankets and being worn out. So we don't have them anymore. Whereas the quilts that were made by the richer class were kept because they were stored away, they were brought out on special occasions, they were hung up to be displayed. They weren't made out of necessity. If you didn't have a large blanket to keep your family warm, then you had to make one. And if you didn't have big sheets of fabric, you would have to stitch them together out of small pieces. The quilters of Gee's Bend are a great example of this. On a plantation in Alabama, slaves created quilts to keep themselves warm. The quilts of Gee's Bend are unique because they are often created with strips of fabric that are not perfectly symmetrical, that are irregular in shape and create irregular patterns. This type of quilting has now become known as improvisational quilting or abstract freeform quilting. Generations ago, many in the Gee's Bend community were enslaved, and then after emancipation, some were allowed to work the land through tenant farming, so they didn't own any of the land, they were just allowed to work it, and they could receive a portion of the harvested crops in return. This system left them perpetually at a disadvantage and always in debt to the landowners. During the Great Depression, with sinking cotton prices, the farmers grew even more in debt. According to the geesbend.org history of Gee's Bend, a Camden merchant who had been advancing credit to more than 60 families in the Bend died. That fall, his estate foreclosed on their debts and organized a raid on Gee's Bend, seizing anything of value, including livestock, farm equipment, and stored food. The raid drove an already impoverished community into complete destitution, forcing them to forage for berries and hunt game to survive the winter. In response to this, the federal government purchased the land and provided low-interest loans to families in Gee's Bend so they could start to own land. Because of this, the families, generation after generation, was able to stay on the land. In the early 1960s, in response to growing participation in the civil rights movement, white officials in the county seat of Camden discontinued ferry service to Gee's Bend, effectively isolating the community and cutting it off from basic services. Wilcox County Sheriff P.C. Lummy Jenkins reportedly said at the time, "We didn't take away the ferry because they were black. We closed it because they forgot they were black." Ferry service between Gee's Bend and Camden would not be restored until 2006. This isolated the community so much they were self-reliant, they were passing traditions on to each other, they were tight-knit. This community overcame horrible circumstances and created some of the most incredible quilts this country has ever seen. Many areas in the U.S. have quilting styles that it is particularly known for. For example, Texas is known for the Lone Star design, while Kentucky is the quilting capital of the world. New England quilts were typically made of pieced wool, and often corners were cut off so that they would fit well onto 4 poster beds. Baltimore, where I'm from, is known for album quilts. They're prized for their unusual designs, exquisite craftsmanship, and striking beauty, representing floral motifs, ships, churches, Baltimore monuments, and historic events. It is the assembling of these blocks, many of which are inscribed with the contributor's name. Each quilt square is similar in spirit to the page of an autograph album. The most distinguishing characteristic of the finest of these quilts made in Baltimore between 1846 and 1852 is the imaginative manner in which printed cottons were pieced together to suggest texture, shading, and contour. There's album quilts all over the country, all over the world, but Baltimore has a specific aesthetic that were made in these years. Amish quilts often feature more simplistic shapes and deeper and darker colors. According to Phyllis Hayder's section of America's Glorious Quilts, quilting has played an important role in the lives of Amish women for more than a century. It affords them a creative outlet, a chance to experiment with brilliant colors, and to socialize with other women at quilting bees. Quilt making is permitted because a quilt is utilitarian, and its construction is considered a natural extension of other matronly duties. However, quilting offers an escape from the daily routine of rural life and provides an opportunity to make something beautiful without being considered prideful or sinful. Perhaps it's the blend of such intrinsic values and the absence of worldly sophistication that's produced the unique style and genius of the great Amish quilts. They differ from other quilts because of the simplicity of design, the instinctive approach to mixing vivid colors, the non-representational patterns, and the exceedingly intricate stitching. Hawaiian quilts are known for cutting out one large intricate design and then appliquing that on one large background color. According to Lee S. Wild's section of America's Glorious Quilts, it is not known exactly when the appliqued Hawaiian quilt evolved. However, the making of patchwork quilts was introduced to Hawaiians by the wives of American missionaries. According to Dorothy B. Barr, most Hawaiian patchwork quilts tend to follow traditional patterns with individuality expressed by color arrangement. The traditional patterns are extensions of kapa designs, especially the kapa beater motifs. The Hawaiian appliqued quilt, kapa lau or kapa apana, likewise was inspired by the kapa patterns. And that's just naming a few of the regional types of quilts that we see throughout the United States. Through quilts, we can glean an understanding of history, culture, and politics. There are quilts commemorating elections, depicting parts of wars. There's a quilt that shows Abraham Lincoln at his child's wedding. Going back to Gee's Bend, on March 26, 1966, more than 60 quilters from Gee's Bend, Alberta, and surrounding communities met in Camden's Antioch Baptist Church to found the Freedom Quilting Bee, one of the few black women's cooperatives in the United States. The FQB quickly grew into a robust organization, landing contracts with decorators and with Bloomingdale's to produce made-to-order quilts, helping to inspire a national revival of interest in patchwork. In 1969, the FQB acquired 23 acres of land on County Road 29 in Alberta and built a 4,500 square foot sewing center, allowing it to expand its offerings to include direct-to-consumer sales. The new building also allowed the FQB to extend services to its members and surrounding communities such as daycare, and after-school tutoring program, and summer reading program. In its time, the FQB brought significant benefits to the area in the form of jobs and leadership opportunities for the community's women. At its height, it had 150 members, making it one of the largest employers in the area. Nettie Petway Young, whose work for the organization spanned 5 decades, recalled, "The Bee was the first business Black people in Wilcox owned. It was the first time I knew I was special, the first job I had, excusing cotton picking." For generations, the women of Gee's Bend have been creating patchwork quilts by piecing together scraps of fabric and clothing in abstract designs that had never before been expressed on quilts. Their patterns and piecing styles were passed down over generations, surviving slavery and Jim Crow, enlivened by a visual imagination that extends the expressive boundaries of the quilt genre. These astounding creations have expanded the realm of Black visual culture and opened a door to a new understanding of American art and history. The early quilts from this movement were made of flour sacks, work clothes, and fertilizer sacks. According to soulsgrowndeep.org, despite a wider variety of cheap fabric becoming available in the second half of the 20th century, the recycling of old materials continues to be a central tenet of quilting in Gee's Bend. The practice of reusing old materials has resulted in a proclivity for improvisational approaches to quilt design. Many Gee's Bend quilts can be called improvisational or my way quilts, as they are known locally, in which quilt makers start with the basic forms, then follow their own individual artistic paths their way, to stitch unexpected patterns, shapes, and colors. The transference of aesthetic knowledge and skills from generation to generation has been fundamental to the continuation of the Gee's Bend quilting tradition to this day.
Use this. It has special powers. I call it the baby maker.
Be super careful with that one.
The tradition of quilting is kind of enmeshed with American folk or folklore, and through that tradition there actually stem a lot of superstitions that go along with quilting. For example, in Deborah Harding's section of America's Glorious Quilts, she lists the superstitions. If a girl shakes a new quilt out the front door, the first man who enters will be her husband. If an unmarried girl puts in the last stitch of the quilting, she will be an old maid. If the thread breaks, it will bring bad fortune. Lone Star quilts can be bad luck in certain circumstances. A person who starts a Lone Star quilt will never live to finish it. If a single girl makes one, she will never marry. Shaking the cat meant that a cat would be placed on a finished quilt and several girls, usually 4, would grasp the edges and shake it. When the cat jumped out, the girl closest to it would be the next to marry. Never begin a quilt on a Friday. Never quilt at all on Sundays. Tulips in patterns symbolize love. Pineapples indicate hospitality. A pomegranate symbolizes abundance, and rings and hearts also indicate love. Quilts should incorporate a deliberate flaw, such as mismatched colors or a pattern that is askew, as a reminder that only God can make a perfect object. Sleep under a new quilt and your dreams will come true.
I wanted to do better things. When I went to march in the civil rights movement, I didn't know the police and everything was there, taking people to jail, beating them and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know. I really wanted to become a registered voter. You know, when you become a voter, you could do something.
In World War I, women used quilting to raise money for the American Red Cross. According to Deborah Harding in America's Glorious Quilts, one slogan of the time was, "Make quilts, save the blankets for our boys over there." Red Cross quilts were made by groups to be auctioned, and the monies were then sent to the Red Cross. Nancy J. Rowley writes of a school class that raised enough money from auctioning a quilt to adopt 3 war orphans, which meant sending them the sum of $36 for each child, thus sponsored. Sorry, the sun was starting to set, so I turned on some more lights, so the lighting is a little different now. According to Modern Quilting by Julius Arthur, quilts have also been part of the fight for change, equality, and remembrance. In 1987, the AIDS Memorial Quilt was first displayed in Washington, D.C., one of the world's largest community craft projects to this day. This quilt was created by thousands to honor, remember, and celebrate those who lost their lives or were affected by the HIV/AIDS pandemic. I think in this fast fashion climate that we're in, a slow, methodical way of creating something that's made of fabrics is really beautiful and inspiring. Quilting is a very scrappy art form. Literally, again, we can look to G's Bend for their philosophy on quilt making.
Some of our old blue jeans, and I just took them and cut them up and made this, turn it into a quilt. Sometimes you're walking along the highway, you see an old piece of material, wait to pick it up and run home and give it to my mama. You know, she put it in a quilt.
Even though the community grew out of its destitute position and cheaper cottons became available, they still hold to the tradition of creating their quilts out of salvaged cloth.
Young lovers seek perfection. Old lovers learn the art of sewing shreds together and of seeing beauty in a multiplicity of patches.
Last year when Gavin and I were traveling through New England, we happened across a place called Rocky Mountain Quilts. This was an antique quilting shop, and the owner is a quilt collector, and also she said she had been to Japan to teach the American style of quilting there. But in this place, both of us kind of had renewed interest in quilting. I was always drawn to quilting through a design perspective, but the visit to this shop kind of renewed my interest. Just seeing that some of the quilts, they were hundreds of years old and worth many thousands of dollars. My grandma quilted, and I know that because we have one small baby quilt that she made for my older sister, but I have never seen any other quilts from her or by her, so I don't know if she's made others actually. But my dad told me that my great-great-grandfather was a quilter. My dad's side is from Maine, and in the Maine Capitol Museum, they have one of his quilts in storage. It's a goal of mine to one day see it. So apparently I come from a line of quilters, but this skill was not passed down. My dad didn't learn to quilt. I'm not sure if my aunts know how to quilt. I should ask them, but I would really love to learn. So through reading all these quilting books, I think that I can do it. One of my toxic qualities is that I think I can do anything. Like, I have this mindset that if I really put my mind to it, I can accomplish whatever task I set before myself. So much so that sometimes I don't know when to quit or when to ask for help. But I do have a tub of quilting materials at my parents' house that I left there when I moved out. And then there's a bunch of material to make a few different types of quilts. So I hope that I will actually create one, a family quilt that me and Gavin can display here in the house. If you notice behind me, this quilt I got from Facebook Marketplace with that quilt top. I'll double check. I think it was like 70 bucks for both. I am a cheapskate, so for me, I'm like, ugh, that's a lot of money. But in the realm of quilts, handmade quilts and vintage handmade quilts from vintage fabric, that is a very good deal. Quilting has evolved for thousands of years, and it's been used in so many contexts, but one way I really love seeing is how they're used in clothing. I think quilt jackets are so beautiful, and there's a few that I kind of follow, but of course I'd love to make one of my own someday. Many times these clothes are made of salvaged quilts that are in disrepair, so it creates kind of a recycling cycle, where often these quilts were made of salvaged, recycled cloth from clothing, and then the quilt is used and enjoyed for a long time, and then the quilt gets gets cannibalized and put back into clothing. It's like the circle of life. Even places like Target and Macy's have quilted jackets, and my loved ones know that I love quilted things, so they got me jackets from those places. So I have 2 that are fast fashion quilted jackets, and I do like them, but it's a bit of a bummer that this quilted practice has been stripped to its barest form of just pieces of fabric sewn together with a machine, pieced together to create a jacket, and then it's a quilted jacket. So it is a quilt, but all of the tradition and culture is gone from it.
Hand over the quilt, Edith. Come and take it, Lillian. Yeah, bring it.
The popularity of quilts in the US has kind of gone like this through the centuries because of the change in technologies, the Great Depression, state fairs, and quilt shows, the popularity of abstract design. In Luella Doss's section of America's Glorious Quilts, she says, "The sterility and uniformity of mass-produced homes and furnishings have created a need for human warmth in our environment. An individual who creates in the textile medium of quilts is responding to a real cultural need. The fact that quilting is experienced on myriad levels by over 1 million Americans is evidence of the influence of this medium on the growth of the new American consciousness. The revival of quilting and the reversal of industrialization's contempt for the work of human hands has been eclipsed by the role that technology has played in encouraging the boom in today's quilt making." And this was written in the 1980s. Quilting bees were gatherings of folks who came together to finish a quilt. They would sit on all sides of the quilt and they would stitch and do the actual quilting together. Unless it was a friendship quilt, usually just one person made the quilt top, and then a bunch of folks would work together to create the final quilt. This was a community task that brought neighbors together, brought communities closer, and where folks, especially women, could thrive. These events used to be commonplace, and with the way American society has shifted, these just aren't normal anymore. But they aren't all gone. Quilters, guilds, and symposiums have been formed to keep this craft alive in a community setting. Luella Doss says, "Quilters often seem to be motivated by a strong urge to create something of lasting value, even a masterpiece in which the values and traditions of the past are incorporated within a validly contemporary work. Without totally insulating themselves against everyday matters, many quilters state that the quilting process itself is an aid in setting one's pace, offering social and communal contacts, and developing respect for oneself and for others. Quilters are learning through practice that creativity is best nurtured, not through exhaustion, but by allowing sufficient time for leisure, and they are realizing that their work partakes of their personality."
I realize I am somebody. I can do anything that I put my mind to do it. You can look at a quilt. It can give you a feeling of something. You know, it gives you love. You can see love. You can see peace. You can see joy in different quilts.
And with that, I think I've yammered on long enough. If you've been inspired to create something with your own hands, please let me know. Quilting is such an amazing art form, and I hope that I'll be able to make one of my own soon. Obviously, I didn't cover everything that quilting has to offer in this country or all around the world. I didn't talk about like the famous Kantha or burro quilts, but hopefully you've been inspired to do your own research and hopefully find out more if this topic is of interest to you. I have a good amount of home projects coming up that I'm excited to share with you guys. Thank you so much for being here and watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Woodloo, woodloo, the life of Rosalind is the life form.